The amount of money some NBA players lost from being greedy is mind-blowing. I would need serious therapy to convince myself life isn't about money. So let's look at the worst of the worst. At the end of each, I'll tell you how much money they lost. Number 10, Dwayne Wade. We start with the least painful example, but people forget LeBron James screwed his buddy D Wade in 2014. Wade opted out of the final 2 years to make room for LeBron on the Heat. Not greedy at all. But LeBron went back to the Cavaliers. Couldn't he have texted D Wade like, hey man, just it's probably not a good idea. You should just wait. But it turned into hurt feelings later when the Heat offered Wade less money in free agency. So D Wade said, forget y'all, I'm going to Chicago. He opted out of $42 million, signed for $34, losing $16.5 million. That's a 19% pay cut. Number 9 is John Amici. Lesser known than D Wade, but it hurt a lot more. Amici didn't want to be a Laker and back up Shaq, so he turned down their offer and went back to the Magic taking a lot less. He thought, you know what, I'm gonna be loyal here and they'll reward me. That didn't happen. Instead, they traded him to the Jazz and he was out of the league in 2 years. Who is a role player and turns down the bag? Especially in LA, right before their three-peat. This guy messed up on a lot of levels. The offer was for $17 million. He signed for $600K. Lost $16 million, a 66% decrease. Number 8, Nerlens Noel. He was having dinner at Ben Simmons' house. First red flag right there. And Agent Rich Paul said, you know what? I think you're a $100 million player. So Nerlens fired his agent right then and turned down a huge deal with Dallas. Then nothing happened. No deals came in free agency. He had to sign another small deal, but it turned out the Sixers had been calling Rich Paul with offers and he wouldn't return their calls. Other teams said the same thing happened to them, so Nerlens Noel sued Rich Paul. The offer from Dallas, $70 million. He signed for 4 instead, a $66 million loss, a 77% pay cut. Number 7 is Bonzi Wells. Had the best season of his career in 2006, so he wanted to get paid. The Kings offered great money for a role player, but Bonzi knew he was a star. His agent didn't feel that way, so he fired him, but in the meantime, the Kings paid someone else. So Bonzi goes back to the Kings like, oh, can I actually take that deal? But they said, no, sorry, we already paid someone else. So he signed a much smaller contract and was in China 2 years later. The offer was $36 million. He signed for $5 million, losing $31 million, an 86% pay cut. Number 6, DeMarcus Cousins. Now, we all know Boogie was supposed to get a max deal before he tore his Achilles, but no one mentions the other contract he turned down. Boogie played well with Anthony Davis before the Achilles tear, and the Pelicans still wanted him around. They put a smaller deal on the table, but Boogie turned it down because he was still thinking of that max contract. So he signed with Golden State for the mid-level, and we all know he hasn't been healthy since. Boogie will never see that money again. And I'm not counting the max because that was never official. The Pelicans did offer though $40 million with a torn Achilles. He signed for 5.3, an 87% decrease. Number 5, Dennis Schroeder. People forget how good he was next to Chris Paul in the Thunder. He shot 39% from 3 with decent defense. Turns out it was just another example of CP3 making his teammates better. But Schroeder let it go to his head. He turned down a huge offer from the Lakers, thinking he was worth $100 million. Then he shot 0 for 9 in their most important playoff game against the Suns. So Schroeder signed a small deal with Boston thinking, oh, then I'll get a big deal. But they traded him to the Rockets for washed up Daniel Tice. Schroeder will never see an offer like the $84 million from the Lakers. He signed for about 6 in Boston, losing $78 million, a 93% pay cut. Number 4, Shabazz Muhammad was supposed to be the number 1 pick out of high school, but he fell to 14 because of character issues. He was a decent scorer, but hated anything that didn't make a highlight, like, passing or defense. So when the Wolves hired Tom Thibodeau, Baz got fewer minutes, and he was so upset, he turned down an extension. Instead, he signed the minimum in Milwaukee and was out of the league in just 11 games. Baz is still trying to get back in the league at 29 years old, but he is one of the saddest examples of getting greedy. The offer was for $40 million. He signed for 1.5, losing $38 million, 96% of his money. Number 3 is Victor Oladipo, one of the best players in the league for like 6 months before his injury. But the Pacers still offered him generational money that he turned down. How could an injured player do that? So they traded him to the Rockets, who also offered him a huge contract that he turned down again. No one on this list turned down back-to-back contracts. Vic is really big on betting on himself, and honestly, I hope it works out, because last year a surgeon said when he opened Vic up, the last doctor totally botched the surgery. The talent is in there, but his body might let him down. So now, theoretically, Vic thinks he's gonna show us all that he's worth that big deal. We will see, but he turned down $112 million from the Pacers, signed for 2.3, lost $110 million, 98% of his money. Number 2, Joe Smith, the number 1 overall pick by Golden State in 1995. Played so well, the Dubs offered him a big contract, which he turned down to attempt the biggest salary cap scandal of all time. He signed with Minnesota for the minimum to let them, spend on other players. That's not greedy. What a guy. Then his agents sued each other, revealing in court documents Smith had an illegal plan. The Wolves told Smith if he signed for the minimum 3 years in a row, they could get his bird rights and then give him like a max contract. And the plan almost worked. The NBA found out just after he signed that third tiny deal. But they voided all of his bird rights and took away 4 first-round picks from Minnesota. The offer from Golden State was for $80 million. He signed for under 2, losing $78 million, a 98% pay cut. But number 1 is Latrell Sprewell. Became a superstar after he choked his coach PJ Carlissimo in practice. Spree was an all-star before that, but he became a household name after the attack. The NBA suspended him a full year, but he came back and led the Knicks to the finals in 1999. Spree became an all-star 2 years later, but he was still a problem off the court. He broke his hand in a fight, was unable to play. Then with the Timberwolves, he and KG got to the conference finals. So Minnesota offered him a big deal for a 34-year-old. But Spree turned it down, saying, "I've got a family to feed." And we all know you can't feed your family for less than $100 million. I actually feel bad for him. But other NBA teams did not. Nobody picked him up. So instead he signed in China. The offer was $21 million down to $0 million, a 100% pay cut. And all of this reminds me of players right now that are in danger of losing money. The Cavaliers offered Colin Sexton 3 years, $40 million. His agent though, Rich Paul, thinks Sexton's worth at least $20 million a year. The good news is he's just 23 years old. Unlike a lot of these guys on this list, he has years to make his money. But there are plenty of examples of things actually working out. Jalen Brunson is a player who turned down $56 million from the Mavericks in the middle of the season to get $104 million from the Knicks. But a bigger list of players who are making a gamble is the 2023 free agents list. It's cool because you get to see who's about to be available on the market, but some of these guys could regret getting greedy. Check this video out.